Syracuse must have one of its quarterbacks emerge in 2025 because not only will it help them win games this upcoming season, but it'll also help them in the long term.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. We are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, could Syracuse have an all-conference linebacker in 2025? It's possible. We'll talk about that later on here in the episode. Also, I think Syracuse could have a 1,000-yard rusher and a 1,000-yard receiver in 2025. We'll explain more later on here in this episode. But first, one of Syracuse's quarterbacks has got to emerge in 2025. All that and more here on today's edition of Locked On Syracuse. Now, before we get to everything, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So on yesterday's show, it was more team-oriented goals. On today's show, we're talking a little bit more about the individuals of Syracuse football. And let's get into how Syracuse needs at least one of its quarterbacks to fully emerge in 2025, possibly even play at an All-ACC caliber level this upcoming season. And I will loop in honorable mention there as well. And we've covered Syracuse's quarterback battle a ton here on this podcast. And there's a reason why we've talked about it a ton on this podcast, because quarterback is the most important position in all of football. And as of right now, at the time of this recording, which is Wednesday, July 16th in the afternoon, we do not know who Syracuse's starting quarterback is going to be week 1 against Tennessee. We have an idea that it's most likely going to be one of the 2 transfers that they brought in this offseason. Whether it's Steve Angeli from Notre Dame, who they brought in the spring, or who they brought in the fall, who was initially named the starting quarterback before Angeli got there, LSU transfer Rickie Collins. And aside from wins and losses, because that's the ultimate team goal, I think the number one goal for Syracuse football from an individual standpoint is that one of Steve Angeli or Rickie Collins emerges for Syracuse football this upcoming season. But let's get into the difference between last year and this year and some of the pros and cons of each. It's important to the story. So 2024, which was last year, there was no controversy at quarterback for Syracuse. They brought in the transfer portal, Ohio State's Kyle McCord. He was going to be the team's quarterback 1. We knew it from the get-go. The moment he signed with Syracuse, there was no controversy whatsoever. He obviously performed to expectation, and I would say probably above expectations. And I had high expectations for him, but he certainly did quite well. He set a lot of ACC records and Syracuse records. He was fantastic. I wouldn't say it's an issue, but one thing that we all kind of understood with Kyle McCord, and we knew this when they brought him in, and even when he was performing well during the season, was that he was going to be a 1-year guy for Syracuse football. He only had 1 more year of college eligibility. Now, he did try to get the 5th year of eligibility from the NCAA, but we'll never know if he would have gotten that 5th year of eligibility, because ultimately he decided to forego that chance of maybe getting it to just going to the NFL draft. He gets picked in the 6th round by the Philadelphia Eagles. That was last year. There's a lot of differences, though, compared to this season. This season, obviously, like I explained earlier, they brought in not one, but two transfer quarterbacks. You got Steve Angeli from Notre Dame, and you got Rickie Collins from LSU. So right off the bat, you got yourself a quarterback battle. Also, neither of them have the same experience that Kyle McCord did at Ohio State when he was transferring to Syracuse. So you brought in two quarterbacks that are less experienced. But one of the pros of both of them is that they have multiple years of college eligibility. So hypothetically speaking, if one of these quarterbacks can emerge for Syracuse football in 2025, potentially play maybe at an all-conference level or somewhere around that range, Syracuse could have that quarterback for 2025 and for 2026. And guess what? If it's Rickie Collins who emerges, possibly even 2027. And there's a benefit to keeping a quarterback. And actually, before I get to that, I want to backtrack here for just a moment. Yes, there is that long-term potential upside. I do want to acknowledge that the transfer portal is a real thing, and that even if you have a quarterback emerge for your team, it's possible that that quarterback could simply leave in the transfer portal. But my best guess is that if one of these guys emerges for Syracuse in 2025, which hopefully happens, that Syracuse and hopefully the quarterback would do everything in their power to make sure that they stay at Syracuse for at least another season. And there's also that small possibility that one of them performs so well that they decide to forego their extra years of eligibility and enter the NFL draft. And to that, I say, that is a terrific problem to have if one of them plays extremely well and decides, you know what, I'm going to the NFL. I think we would all take that problem, right? Comment in the comments section below if you're with me on that one. But now, fast forward to what I was going to talk about a minute ago, which is the benefit of keeping a quarterback for multiple years. For Syracuse, last year, obviously with Kyle McCord, even though he was 1 year, they struck gold. Like it was perfect. It was a perfect fit in the system with offensive coordinator Jeff Nixon, a spread offense. Absolutely perfect for Kyle McCord in Syracuse. It was a match made in heaven. Having said that, you look around the country, that oftentimes does not happen with first-year transfer quarterbacks. Cam Ward actually was great for Miami, by the way. I mean, damn near almost won the Heisman Trophy and was the number one pick in the NFL draft. So I would say Miami, it worked out pretty good for them too regarding a one-year transfer quarterback. But for every one of those guys, Kyle McCord, a Cam Ward, 1 year transfer, there's also the flip side. Unfortunate what happened with NC State with Grayson McCall because he got hurt. But even before he got hurt, Grayson McCall, NC State, not very good. Did you see what happened to Florida State as well? With DJ, 1 year transfer quarterback. So my point being is that for every amazing, awesome 1 year transfer quarterback a school can get, like Syracuse and Miami, there's the flip side of last year, which was you could be NC State or even Florida State. The point is that you want to keep your quarterback on your roster for as long as possible. And the reason is because of continuity. You want continuity at the game's most important position. You want your quarterback to be in the same system, assuming it works for him, right? If it works, if Steve Angeli or Rickie Collins name the starting quarterback and Jeff Nixon's the offensive coordinator and they click, well, you want them both back for the upcoming season. You want the same system in place. You don't want them having to learn a new playbook. You don't want them having to learn all these new weapons, a new offensive line. Because that stuff is not easy to do in one offseason. But if you can have your quarterback for multiple years and grow with your team, and there's inevitably going to be some sort of turnover But if you can have them grow with your team and a similar coaching staff with similar weapons around them, a similar offensive line, the potential to be even better the following year goes way up. So overall, the number one goal for Syracuse football, have a quarterback emerge. Steve Angeli, Rickie Collins, Steve Angeli. Hopefully one of them could play at a very high level for Syracuse, and Syracuse could have them for the 2026 season. Furthermore, one more point here. Regarding the young guys on Syracuse's roster, the guys that are behind those top two, Luke Carney, Rich Bellin, Zaid Lott, who they're bringing in the class of 2026, it gives them another year to develop. Yeah, they'd be sitting on the bench, but it does give them another year to potentially develop, to harness their skills in practice before they're ever thrown into the fire. There are so many benefits to keeping a quarterback for multiple seasons. I want to know what you think. Comment in the comment section below. Aside from wins and losses, your number one goal for Syracuse football this upcoming season. Do you agree that it's having one of the quarterbacks emerge? Comment in the comment section below. Now, coming up, could Syracuse have a 1,000-yard rusher and a 1,000-yard receiver? I'll explain more next on Locked On Syracuse. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following along the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling, right? Maybe you're at a baseball game with a few buddies, and baseball games, particularly in the beginning, are always really fun, really exciting. But then you get to kind of the mid portion of the game, innings 4, 5, and 6, and it can sometimes feel like a little bit of a drag. And well, maybe that's where FanDuel can come in, because you can lay same game parlays while you're actually at a game. And with FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends maybe are getting sunburned at the beach, right? New to FanDuel? Well, it's the perfect time to sign up. New customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Could Syracuse football have a 1,000-yard rusher and a 1,000-yard receiver? Well, let's talk about it here on Locked On Syracuse. And before we do so, though, comment in the comment section below if you think that Syracuse could do that in 2025. Now, we've gone over the running backs and the wide receivers in position preview podcasts actually fairly recently. And in case you've missed those podcasts, well, you can go on YouTube and you can go to the playlist section and you'll find a playlist that has Syracuse football 2025 position previews. And if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts on your audio platform, you can scroll down and probably find some of them there as well. They're out there, right? What you'll notice in those podcasts, and if you've already tuned in, is that I have confidence in Syracuse's skill positions, more so in the wide receivers than in the running backs. Now, even though they're losing a lot of proven production, I still think that Syracuse could have a really effective offense. They're not going to have Oronde Gadsden. They're not going to have Jackson Meeks. They're not going to have Trevor Pena. They're not going to have LaQuinn Allen. But I do think that Syracuse will have an effective offense in 2025. So a goal that I have for Syracuse football, I guess from an individual standpoint, is to have a 1,000-yard rusher and a 1,000-yard wide receiver. I do think it's possible. Syracuse did it last year. It was with LaQuinn Allen rushing and Jackson Meeks receiving. And they nearly did it in 2022. Sean Tucker went for over 1,000 rushing yards, and Oronde Gadsden fell just short of 1,000 receiving yards. He had 975 in 2022. Now, similar to last segment, if Syracuse could have a 1,000-yard rusher and a 1,000-yard receiver, not only could it help them in 2025, but it's possible that both those players could have multiple years of eligibility, meaning they could be back for Syracuse in 2026. And again, also it's also possible that one of those players plays so well that they decide to enter the NFL draft, foregoing extra years of eligibility. And again, to that I say, that is a good problem to have. So who could be the 1,000-yard rusher for Syracuse football? Well, this one is tricky because I mentioned in the running back podcast how I think Syracuse football could do running back by committee between Yasin Willis and Will Nixon. That would mean that neither running back, at least to start, would be a quote-unquote bell cow back. And you kind of need to be a bell cow back in order to get to 1,000 yards because you need the rushing attempts to be able to get to 1,000 yards. Each would probably need a minimum of 200 carries to get to 1,000, but it's more like they'll probably need to get to at least 225 to get to 1,000 yards. Are either of them going to be able to get that many carries this upcoming season? I do think it's possible, but if they go by committee, that won't happen. And so Syracuse most likely won't have a 1,000-yard rusher. But I do think there's an outside shot it does happen, especially if Fran Brown and Jeff Nixon say to Yasin Willis or Will Nixon, you're our guy, you're going to be the workhorse running back for our team, and you're going to get the ball 225, 250 times on the ground. Well, then Syracuse is in business for a 1,000-yard rusher. As far as 1,000-yard receiver, I think this is far more likely to happen. I think it's got to be one of Darrell Gill or Johntay Cook, maybe even an outside shot. It's Justice Ross Simmons. But I think Gill is the most likely, and he does have multiple years of eligibility, which is kind of nice. I think with Darrell Gill and Johntay Cook specifically, they each, in my opinion, have more of a probability to hit 1,000 yards. And it's mainly because I don't think they need the volume, the normal volume to do it. Last season, Darrell Gill led the ACC with over 18 yards per catch. Johntay Cook, in his career, albeit in limited number of catches, he averages 17 yards per catch. That means in order for either of them to hit 1,000 yards, if they can maintain a similar average yards per catch, which might be hard to do, but if you can maintain a similar yards per catch, they would only need around 60 receptions to reach 1,000 yards. And hey, there's enough to go around for one of these receivers to get 60 catches. In fact, one of them will likely get to 60, probably Darrell Gill at minimum. For context, Jackson Meeks, who was Syracuse's 1,000-yard receiver last year, he needed 78 catches to do it, and he barely got over 1,000. It's no shade to Jackson Meeks. The point being is that if you can stretch the field more, you don't need the ball as much to be able to hit 1,000 yards. So rounding out this segment, I do think there is an outside shot, and that's why I'm saying this is a goal for Syracuse football from an individual standpoint, that they have a 1,000-yard rusher and a 1,000-yard wide receiver. Do you see that happening for Syracuse? Or am I just being way too pie in the sky? We shouldn't even be talking about it. Comment in the comment section below. Now, coming up, could Syracuse have an All-ACC linebacker this upcoming year? Well, let's talk about it. Coming up next. I'm Jackson Holzer. This is Locked On Syracuse. Before we continue this podcast talking about whether or not Syracuse should have an all-conference linebacker in 2025 and how it's a goal for Syracuse this upcoming season, I just want to thank you all for making it to this point in the podcast. Of course, if you're already liking this podcast and you've already subscribed to the channel, truly means a ton. You all are truly the best. And hey, if you haven't done so already and you've already made it this far in the podcast, if you just do me a quick favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow to reach all Syracuse Orange fans. Now let's get back to the podcast and whether or not Syracuse could have a all-conference linebacker in 2025. Now, I don't want to contradict myself because we already did a linebacker position preview podcast here on this channel. And I'm not going to lie to you, I'm kind of concerned about the unit. I'm not sure about the top end of it. And then the depth, it's kind of young, maybe a little inexperienced. We'll talk about one linebacker in particular coming from an FCS school. So, yes, I am kind of concerned about Syracuse's linebacker room. But having said that, just because I'm concerned, or maybe you are concerned, maybe you feel differently about Syracuse's linebackers, that doesn't mean it's going to come to fruition. I can be concerned about something and it ends up being a big positive. And it works the other way around. I'm very optimistic about Syracuse's wide receivers. It could turn out by midseason, we're talking about how Syracuse has no depth and nobody at the top of their wide receiver room. You never quite know, and that's why ultimately teams play the games. But when I look on paper, looking at all the position groups, I am a little bit concerned about Syracuse's linebacker room, and that's why I do think that we all would probably want a linebacker to emerge and potentially play at an all-conference level in 2025. Even just make honorable mention. We're throwing that in there. Honorable mention, we'll take it, right? Well, for it to happen for Syracuse, they're going to probably need a surprise. McDonald and Anwar Sparrow, they've been with the team since 2021. They're obviously veterans. They're capable linebackers, but neither of them have ever played to an All-ACC level. Is this finally the year for them? This is it. I think that's their last year of eligibility. Better late than never, right? Gary Bryant, a nice transfer portal pickup from South Dakota. How is he going to look playing in the Power Four? There's a big difference between Power Four and an FCS school. It can be done, but can it be done in 1 year where Gary Bryant all of a sudden becomes an all-conference linebacker? Maybe, but again, we're going to need a surprise for this goal to happen. Perhaps it's a true freshman in Antoine Delorier. Syracuse in recent times has actually had a true freshman play at an all-conference level. That was Deuce Chestnut. Back in 2021, he made, I believe, All-ACC third team and was a freshman All-American with Syracuse as a corner. For context, relating this back to linebackers, I looked at last season's all-conference teams, including honorable mention, 21 linebackers made the cut. So all we're really asking for is for Syracuse to have just one top 20-ish linebacker in the conference. So even though I am concerned about the unit, I do think it's possible that someone emerges as a top 20-ish linebacker in the ACC. And if it's one of the younger players that emerges, even better. Because what I have been saying throughout the time is that, hey, if a guy has multiple years of eligibility, well, I know the transfer portal is a real thing, but hey, at least you could have him for multiple years. What do you think? Comment in the comments section below whether or not you believe Syracuse could have an all-conference linebacker in 2025. I do think it's a realistic goal. I wouldn't necessarily put any money on it, but I do think it's possible, and that's why I'm mentioning it here on Locked On Syracuse as a goal for the Orange in 2025. Now, as far as what is coming up for Locked On Syracuse here in the near future, tomorrow we'll do a Syracuse football position preview podcast. I'm still deciding on which unit it will be, offense or defense. Don't really know yet. Friday is Poll Friday, which is what needs to improve the most for Syracuse football in 2025 compared to 2024. You can vote on Twitter at LO_Syracuse and on YouTube in the post section, Locked On Syracuse. It is right there for you. So that's what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the near future. And thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. Now, for your second listen, you might want to check out the Locked On Portal Show with football recruiting expert Brian Smith, who's got the latest rumors and signings each and every day. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape and find the Portal Podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really like the podcast, if you can just do me a favor, just a small favor here, just tell one or two of your closest Syracuse friends about the Locked On Syracuse podcast so this channel can grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. Of course, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and folks, I will see you all again soon.